Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, whatever the case may be for you. My name's Carl Dermery. I'm a retired social studies consultant from Louisiana.
My name is Scott Barnhart. I'm an attorney in Indiana, working at the Indiana Attorney General's office.
Hello, my name is Dan Wong. I'm a retired attorney and former judge. I'm also on the board of directors for the Center for Civic Education. I'm very excited to be here. I live in Boise, Idaho.
Okay, students, if you can introduce yourselves and your teacher.
Hello, my name is Riley Martin.
Hello, my name is Celeste Taheri.
Hello, my name is Blas Villanueva.
And I'm Emma Stamper, and we're sophomores at Cottonwood Classical in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and our teacher is Mr. Torres.
Well, thank you for being here today, especially for Mr. Torres, your teacher. I admire all of you for sticking with it and this being the culmination of the program. And I know it's been difficult, but difficult people rise to the occasion. So I just admire all of you so much for being here today, and I hope you have a good experience. I'm going to ask you today question number 1, and it reads as follows. In 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Never in the history of this nation have so many people been arrested for the cause of freedom and human dignity." What lessons can be learned from the Children's March in Birmingham, Alabama? What is civic engagement, and what is its significance in American history? What responsibility, if any, do schools have to promote civic engagement? You may begin.
Esther Fecci, the director of the Center of Entrepreneurship at the Austral University of Chile, said, "Students and youth are capable of taking civic engagement and social responsibility to a new level. This concept was embodied in the Children's March in Birmingham, one of the finest examples of civic engagement in American history, which teaches the power that the youth of a society can have to affect change. The Children's March is unique in its strategic involvement of young people. Because jailed adult protesters could not pay bills, raise children, or work, children acted as a first line of protesters to fill the jails and avoid the loss of jobs and houses. Furthermore, the violation of the human dignity of children appealed to the empathy of America at large. Despite brutal treatment from the police, the children protested racial inequality in Birmingham, showing resilience and great civic virtue. Civic engagement is the attempt to bring about change in civil life by utilizing experience, skills, principles, and motivation. Examples of civic engagement include the Indian independence movement, the American women's suffrage movement, the anti-apartheid revolution in South Africa, and contemporary examples in America, such as protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline, teacher strikes in Chicago, and protests against stay-at-home orders in Michigan.
Perhaps the best example in America is the civil rights movement, which engaged people of all ages and backgrounds who, despite not all having access to resources or excellent education, endured great cruelty to reverse the injustice of a government that did not represent its people. The lessons of perseverance and the power of every citizen that the civil rights movement Birmingham Children's March teach are preserved into future generations through education. Civic engagement is linked to the classical Republican idea called civic virtue, that people should work toward the common good of their societies over their own interests. An example of civic virtue in America today is the widespread COVID-19 social distancing, which teaches the value of protecting the elderly, those with pre-existing conditions, and essential workers, even at personal cost. Under classical republicanism, the state's primary role is teaching future generations to be civically virtuous, so that they advance the common good and become responsible citizens. The American public school system embodies this by shaping future generations and choosing what messages we send to them. If civic engagement is not actively taught in schools, apathy is learned.
Janice Kelsey was in 11th grade when she was arrested for her involvement in the Birmingham Children's March. When interviewed, she said she didn't hate white people, she hated the system. Kelsey learned a lesson of civic engagement, not apathy. In his letter from Birmingham jail, Dr. King wrote that the heroes in Birmingham were the young high school and college students sitting in at lunch counters and willingly going to jail for conscience sake. Civically engaged citizens like this ensure that the government serves its intended purpose under natural rights philosophy by keeping its citizens safe to enjoy their freedoms. Schools had an opportunity to promote civic engagement during the national student walkouts protesting gun violence at schools in 2018. Schools either punished students for their activism or taught them that civic engagement and petition for redress of grievances are things they should do as American citizens. Civic education like the We the People program bestows the understanding of government necessary for students to keep their governments responsive to their needs.
Programs such as the National Honor Society and the Every Student Succeed Act teach students to become leaders in their communities and to change their circumstances. School-mandated community service shows students the effect they can have in their communities. America needs a civically engaged public to remain a nation of the people, by the people, and for the people. The Birmingham Children's March teaches us the power of engaged citizens to keep their government in check. Schools shape our youth and our future. They either send a message of civic apathy or of civic duty, and for a functioning democracy, it is imperative that they send the latter. Schools need not only to teach students, but empower them to change their nation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, and I will ask the first question. You mentioned about the Martin Luther King, that it was strategic involvement because the students would be more empathetic to the people. What I'd like to know, is there any issue that any of you believe in so strongly that you would put your health or safety on the line and you would face like those pressurized water cannons or those biting dogs?
Well, obviously, I've never been in a situation where I've faced something as terrible as the treatment of the children in the Birmingham Children's March. I do believe passionately in issues of gun control or of gun violence at school campuses, and I believe that issue is so important to me because these are children that are being killed at school campuses in every school shooting. And because that issue is so passionate to me, I think I would be willing to put my own safety on the line and potentially go to jail for it, because I believe that those are the most innocent people in our society, and those are the people that need to be protected above everything else in our society.
What if you saw on television a bunch of young people being tasered and different things like that? Would that change your mind?
Well, I do believe that would scare me, and I would, of course, be concerned for my future. I believe that because of the level of education I've received and because of the examples I have in history, such great examples like the Birmingham Children's March and like examples such as Tinker v. Des Moines, I have examples of children making changes and children being strong leaders and standing up for what they believe in, even when people try to silence them or push them down, that I believe I would still go out and still protest because it's an issue I believe so strongly in. And I've seen examples how civically engaged citizens can make changes, even when they are young, like children.
If I were to see actions such as these, like children being tasered, I would be very shocked, because under the First Amendment, we have the right of freedom of speech. And so the fact that we aren't allowed to protest what we believe should happen, like gun control should occur more specifically, I think that it would be kind of contradicting the First Amendment with the freedom of speech clause.
I also think that we have the right to petition our government, and so I think under the First Amendment as well. And so I think that, as Blas was saying, gun control is another thing that I would put my life on the line for. I think that in schools, guns are something that purposely are harmful to young innocent lives. And although that seeing young children being tasered, I mean, that's horrifying. I think that it's our job as citizens of America, it's our job to approach the government with what is upsetting us and what is harmful to our society and to our belief as American citizens.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Scott, you need to unmute.
Thank you. I'd like to follow up on that. And what about the parents, right? Were they acting civically virtuous when they allowed their children to participate in these marches and risk, potentially harmful results as a result of this? What about them?
While I do think it is the job of the parents to protect their children, I think that if they didn't allow their children to stand up for something that they believe so strongly in, that they'd be willing to take those risks, I think that it would be teaching them in that their viewpoint doesn't matter, or that they they shouldn't be able to risk anything in order to get what they want. And I think that would be a very harmful thing.
Beyond that, I think many of the parents were also actively involved in the civil rights movement and seeking change themselves. And I think that what's so incredible about the Birmingham Children's March is that while it may be easy to, at first glance, think that these children were exploited for their cause and didn't really understand what was going on, they were so well civically educated and they had civic virtue drilled into them that they knew what they were doing and they understood the risks, and they still wanted to go out and because they felt this duty to improve their society. They felt this duty to make it better for the next generation of African Americans in America. And so they knew the risks and they still decided to protest because they thought their cause was so just.
Thank you. My question is, are the protesters against the governor's stay-at-home orders engaging in appropriate or inappropriate civic engagement?
I think that according to the First Amendment, you can completely see where they're coming from. You can see that their right to assembly has been infringed upon. You can see that the freedom of religion has been infringed upon. So I think that these protests are fair, although we have to look at the classical republicanism ideals behind the reason that these orders to stay at home were given. And we have to look at why we were told to stay at home and why we were told to protect the elderly. And so although I think that people are going out and trying to address these grievances that they have for rightful reasons, I think that they're being selfish somewhat and not looking after the good of their community.
Also tying in with what Riley has been saying, I think that it wasn't very civically virtuous of these people to go out and stand for this, which although they do have the right to stand for it, they aren't taking into consideration what we had mentioned in our statement, that there are people with pre-existing conditions and the elderly, and we have to make sure we take care of them. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Good job.
Oh, that time was up?
Yes.
Oh, time is up. I can't see, unfortunately. So that was all the time?
Yes.
Okay, I'll start with the feedback. I wish I could see the screen. Y'all are so articulate and answer the question so fully. The young man, what was the young man's name who answered my question with starting with putting yourself on the line with gun control? He mentioned Tinker.
Wow.
Case, who was that?
Blas.
What was that?
Blas Villanueva, sir.
I want to compliment you and all of your fellow students on your answers. It's almost like you anticipated my questions, and I know you couldn't have. Strategic involvement. I was going to ask that question a little differently about why this should take the youth and not the adults to push the government. And then you explained it before I even could ask the question, because it was a strategic decision made by Martin Luther King. And you also brought in the nice historical and contemporary examples, and you blended the two very nicely with the Indians and suffragettes, South Africa, also about classical republicanism, not hating white people, hating the system. Explained that very well. I just thought your presentation was very full and complete, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm just disappointed I couldn't actually see you like the little Brady Bunch squares up there where I could actually see you answer the questions. But y'all did a good job, and your teacher is to be congratulated also. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Carl, and you know, as we kind of work through this from a Zoom standpoint, y'all are rolling with the punches or with the fire hoses, if you will, and do an excellent job of doing that. So I want to congratulate you for for seamlessly handling us while we deal with some technical issues. I agree with Carl. I think your examples that you used are very good, and I particularly liked in terms of kind of folding in the stuff that we're dealing with today in COVID-19 and the like. And I appreciated your question, your response to my question, which is a difficult one of, the morality of the parents, right? Where do the parents fit in all this? And you had a really good answer to that. It seemed like you expected that question. So nicely done. Good job.
I very much enjoyed your presentation. I thought your 4-minute presentation answered the question. That's always a big thing for me, because you'd be surprised how many times they don't really address the issues in the questions, but you address them thoroughly by citing lots of good examples. I appreciated that very much. Thought your answers to the cross-examinations questions were also well done. And you continue to bring out the issue of classical republicanism, common good in this environment with the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's these kinds of issues that bring constitutional issues to the forefront. And I am happy that you as constitutional students and scholars understand that the Constitution can be applied and has to be applied in these difficult times. Congratulations on good performance. Thank you. Good luck.